Welcome to Accessibility and Visual Design, the power visual design holds for individuals living with disabilities. My name is Lynn Wehrman, and I will be your presenter today. Before we get started, just some information that I need to share. The information found in this presentation includes tips based upon the experiences and opinions of digital accessibility by WeCo staff and should not be construed as legal advice. Regarding the development and implementation of digital accessibility practices, it's advisable to seek the advice of qualified legal counsel. The information in this presentation is property of the Wehrman Collaborative, LLC, which is our fancy name. And please ask us before distributing this information. You can contact us at accessinfo, ACCESSINFO at theweco.com, THEWECO.com. Thank you. Accessibility note. This presentation includes audio description for non-visual users as part of the narration. So this slide, excuse me, that jumped. This slide shows the title of the presentation and includes WeCo's logo and the International Association of Accessibility Professionals member logo and our disability and disability-owned enterprise logo. The WeCo logo is repeated on most of the slides in this presentation. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I am a former federal program coordinator and an early digital accessibility specialist in state government. I'm also the founder and president of Digital Accessibility by WeCo and a professional living with a disability. First, let's tell you a little bit about who we are. WeCo is a company of digital accessibility professionals who live with disabilities. In fact, we view our disabilities as a skill set, and we require that people who live with a disability fill our technical job roles. We are members of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals and a disability-owned business enterprise. This slide includes our IAP logo, our Disability Adobe Enterprise logo. It also shows a WeCo accessibility specialist who is using screen magnification software in an accessibility audit with the words, "Because simulations can't replace human experience." What we do for our work is that we offer manual accessibility audit services that can help your team understand which areas of your project do not meet accessibility requirements. We also offer disability-focused usability testing. We maintain a team of testers who live with cognitive, mobility, hearing, and sight-related disabilities as they impact computer use. We also pride ourselves on teaching accessibility through direct interaction with our SMEs. This includes live remediation sessions with teams, on-demand learning in our WeCollege learning platform, as well as customized group training. On this slide is a photo of a hand pointing at a tablet with people watching in the background. So what we'll be covering today is inaccessible design, why it excludes people, how users with disabilities interact with visual design, non-visual users, and more. Steps to be accessible and inclusive, and resources for learning more. I will warn you that this is going to be very brief. We have more in-depth training on the subject in our WeCollege learning portal. It's really difficult to get all of this information in 30 minutes and leave time for questions. So just be aware that it's not going to give you everything, but it's going to give you a really good idea of how important visual design is to many of us who live with disabilities. This slide shows a photo of 3 people listening to a presentation. Why is visual access important to people with disabilities? for many of the same reasons that it's important to people without disabilities, including providing subtle nuances to the information that's presented on a web page or a document, adding more depth of meaning to the information presented, allowing people to join in the emotion of an event or a topic, but most of all, provides all users with the same information, regardless of ability level, and that creates inclusion. This slide shows a person seated in a wheelchair, touching a wedding gown in a store, a person with a service dog and a white cane, seated in a park, a watercolor palette, and a painting on a table. This begins to make more sense when you understand that people who cannot see the visual aspects of your design still benefit from them. First, it's important to know that through the technology of screen reader and screen magnification software, users with no or limited vision encounter nearly all aspects of a web page and documents or in software. Their screen readers or magnification devices may use the code structure within a page as navigation or wayfinding points. This enables them to find what they need and what they want more easily. Certain aspects of code may also be used by individuals with cognitive disabilities to better understand content. So here's another picture that we've repeated of our accessibility specialist who's actually conducting an audit with a screen reader and screen magnification software. So we're going to demonstrate to you how a screen reader works with this wonderful presentation by Mark Sutton from the University of California, San Francisco's Digital Accessibility Services Department. And if you have not seen a screen reader in operation before, this is going to really enlighten you regarding how code is helpful for navigation.
This is Mark Sutton from the University of California, San Francisco's IT Web Services Department. Here today with a brief tour of screen reading technology. I'm a blind person who has been using screen readers, braille writers, scanning equipment, other adaptive technologies since my childhood. What a screen reader does is, for example, I'm going to start to read this page.
Navigation 1. Link, University of California, San Francisco, link, about UCSF. Link, search UCSF.
And what I will now do is slow down the speech rate.
Rate 80%, 75%, 70%, 65%, 60%, 55%, 50%, 45%, 40%. Link, UCSF Medical Center.
So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a computer screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited, link, image, home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2, search for heading level 2, you are here. Heading level 1, make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of how that can fall apart. So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag.
You are currently on it.
To describe what that graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic.
Reader 042116.jpg.
Much less useful. So it's important to use those elements. It's also true for tables. So I'm going to move to a table.
FDA approved medications. Table, 3 columns, 5 rows. FDA approved medications.
So the table is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to move into the table.
Medicine. Approved. Column 2 of 3.
And then if I go down into the table.
Medicine. Tolbutamide.
And as I move across.
Approved. 1975, column 2 of 3.
We're getting the labels for the column headers and row headers. So it's important when programming tables, forms, and other elements on the web pages to use the proper HTML codes. I'll go to the
Table 3 columns.
second table on the page.
Medicine. Row 2 of 5, tolutamide.
And as I'm in the
Tolutamide.
table, I move across it.
Row. November 1995.
I get a date, but I don't know what that date is associated with. So it's important, as I was saying, to include proper coding tags for all these elements. These are just a few highlights of a screen reader's capabilities.
Okay, that just gives you a really good introduction how things that we typically think of as purely visual, like tables and images, are really accessible to people across disability types, and how people who are non-visual users really depend upon those visuals being there, much in the same way as many of us who can see. Because there's information presented and that information needs to be shared. Okay, trying to get my slide to advance here.
Screen reading technology.
There we go. Okay. One point that I wanted to bring into this discussion, because of some really interesting experiences that we've had at WeCo, is that there is a way to access information tactily for people who are non-visual users or low vision users. And it may bring up some things you've never thought about. And why I think it's important is to realize that what we create visually can be interpreted and translated in different ways. So for instance, illustrations, they may be visible by touch in an engraved printed document. Printed logos, those are really can be very accessible to people. I love to tell the story about one of our first Christmas parties when we formed the company. We are in Minnesota. It's cold here. At that point, all of our testers were in Minnesota. And so we had a holiday party, and we had the WeCo logo printed on scarves and headbands and hats, so that people had winter wear. And it was really eye-opening because some of our testers who were blind were feeling the WeCo logo and said, I always wondered what the WeCo logo looked like. So, realizing that visuals can be translated in different ways. Another interesting way that a lot of people may not occur to a lot of people is that we have worked with a education software company that had a software program that was teaching children how to write. And they were basically doing this with an electronic paintbrush on a screen. And they wanted to give the same experience to children who were blind. So they decided to pack little clay kits in for the classrooms so that teachers could teach the students how to form letters and feel the letters. So, they're realizing that what is visual can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. One that is probably more common, and certainly common on our team, is a Braille laptop. And that is what we're showing in the picture on this slide. This is one of our lead testers, Maureen, demonstrating a changeable Braille display. And basically how that works is much like a screen reader that encounters one word at a time. It will translate it into movable dots so that Maureen can feel a web page. And visual design, there again, she could encounter an alternative text tag that way. So I think it's important to open our minds to realize that the tactile part is part of the accessibility as well. For users with cognitive disabilities, visual information is extremely important. It can provide clarity to text on a page and break up dense information visually. I was born with 2 cognitive disabilities, epilepsy, and I still live with major mental illness. And I know when my depression is super active if I am on a page with a lot of dense information, it can actually trigger an anxiety attack for me. So those visuals help me understand, but they also soothe me so that I can take in the information and not be overwhelmed. Regardless of if we live with a disability or not, many of us are just better visual learners. So realize that that visual information is something that's really vital. I think that one of the things that often happens, I know when I started doing web design, accessible web design for the state agency I worked with, is that we're often told to forget all the visuals because blind people can't access them. That really used to be the philosophy about 10, 15 years ago. But it always seemed to me that it was really important that we have those visuals for everyone, but people with disabilities can really benefit from those. So this slide shows two people working on a clear schematics board together. When we think of what we create as only visual, we miss opportunities to include everyone in our design. So I'm going to break this down. To recap, as the screen reader video taught us, code plays an important role in the accessibility of our visual designs. So that could be the alternative text tags. All right, that's also how we structure the web page or the software. This is because code is a translation tool that allows some users with disabilities to access what others can see by hearing it read out loud, right? Okay. Code can provide information and provide navigation points, kind of like hand railings for our designs. Many of the software products that we use at WeCo, what everyone uses, have ready-made or built-in accessibility features that are relied upon by people with disabilities. So the screenshot we're showing on this slide is of a Word document with a toolbar, and it's a great example. Word, in a sense, has its own cascading style sheet. When using the style toolbar in Word to create structural headings, for example, the document is coded automatically with navigation points. This is the same principle of CSS plays on websites. So if we don't realize that the structural elements in documents and web pages are also navigation points, we might remove them without realizing it in our quest to make a web page or a document look a certain way. But there are easy ways to keep accessibility features and create beautiful designs. And we are going to show you that next. And I apologize because this is an old video with our old branding, but it's a good one. So we're going to tell a story with this.
Welcome to a WeCo Accessibility Services quick tip video on what makes PowerPoints accessible and inaccessible to non-visual users. Today we're using a template that was created for us by our graphic artist to ensure that what we create blends with our visual brand. But what our graphic artist did not realize when she created the template, that she was essentially removing all of the elements that would make the template accessible to non-visual users by making it visually pleasing. There is actually a way that you can do both, and we're going to talk about that today. So when we take a look at this, we're looking at what looks like a headline and a subhead and a footer, and then we're also looking at some visual accent elements that contains our tagline, accessible, aware, independent, with small dots at the bottom, and then we're also looking at our logo. And the way that you can tell whether or not you're making a PowerPoint accessible is really not very hard at all. If you just go into the View section of your PowerPoint and select Outline View, it will show you what is actually built into the code. Okay, so on this particular slide, what we have, this is one that we've actually done some work in, is that we have the footer showing up, because what we have done is inserted a formal box that, well, used the box for the layout that already exists. So what we're talking about when we do that is when you go into Home and you go into layout. Notice that this one is title and content. So what we've done is that we've used a content box here to add in our logo through the option for adding a visual, and we've added the footer in to the formal content box, so that when we click on this, you can see that we were able to add the alternative text tag there that shows up, and that we're also able to have the footer pick up in the outline view. So let's go on to the next slide. So we go on to the next slide, and when we look at this here, we see that there is nothing picking up. And that is because what oftentimes happens is that graphic artists get very, very used to basically going here and saying, okay, I want to make this look a certain way. I'm going to insert a text box. And so that's what they do. And they can take that text box and expand it to whatever size they want, and they can type what they want into it, and they can select that. Move that up a little bit so you can see it. They can select that text and say, okay, let's go ahead and make this look like a title, so we're going to want it to be 48, and let's say we want it to be bright orange. And that is how they're doing that. And this stuff is not actually picking up when you go and look at the outline view. So the easiest way that you can do this, and sometimes this is something when we get a product like this from our graphic artist, then we pretty much always know that we're going to have to go in and fix the whole thing for accessibility, is that all you have to do is just go into the Home tab and go to Layout and go, okay, well, what represents this slide? Well, this really looks like it is going to be, you can decide whatever it is you need. Is it going to be a section header? Is it going to be a title slide? We're going to call this one a title slide. And then what you can do is, I usually just click that out of the way and you can cut it and you can paste it right in there, and bingo, there it shows up. So, and then also we've done a little bit of advanced work on this. We went in and added alternative text tags for these as well. But you can see that is basically the work that sometimes you have to do, because graphic artists are really concerned with the visual, and many are just not versed in digital accessibility, nor is it what they do every day or think about every day. So that's just one way that we cope with inaccessible PowerPoint presentations here at WeCo. I hope that is helpful to you. If you would like more.
So I apologize. I did that with my phone for a reason. It's not a traditional screenshot. We'll get that updated for the next presentation I do. But it was really interesting because at the time that we got this new PowerPoint presentation, we were working on a project for our state's Olmstead project. If you know what the Olmstead legislation is, it's legislation that says that people living with disabilities have a right to live in their communities. And we had just gotten a slide from a creative firm working on the Olmstead project, and the entire PowerPoint was like this. What's more is that the logo that was created didn't pass WCAG color contrast, which is not really great if you're trying to promote a law for people living with disabilities. So, but if you worked in accessibility, you trip over this stuff all the time. But that was, I sent this off to the graphic artist, and they just went, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I sent it to our graphic artist so she'd stop breaking PowerPoints and sending them over to us. So that's a lot of what we learn is just, by living it. So that's what we're trying to share with you.
Well,
okay. So I'm just checking my time here. We have a little bit of time for, I always like to do group participation because it's much more fun for you and I get to hear from you. We talked just a tiny bit about alternative text tags. I'm sure a lot of you already know what they are. And it's one of the most important ways that we can make our visual designs accessible to non-visual users. It's also important to note that some of us who live with cognitive disabilities will also depend on alternative text tags. On the days that I have a harder time comprehending things, this was actually something that happened to me last week, I can take a look and open up those alt tags and have a better understanding of what is in that image. So this is your imaginary project. Okay, so you have been assigned to describe this image for people who may encounter it, may not be able to see it, or may have difficulty understanding what it means. So take a minute now and compose an alternative text tag and put it in the chat box if you would like to share. I'm going to pop open the chat box so I can see what you've got going. How would you describe this? And it looks like we don't have any takers today, but you feel free to pop something in. Would it help if we offered you a coffee card? We do that sometimes. So we actually teach an entire workshop on alternative text tags and how to write them and how to make them meaningful, what you need to look for to provide context in certain situations, and how to work with the WCAG and alt text. So just realize that's a course that we're uploading currently into our new WeCollege portal. I try to teach a couple live workshops a year, but oh, we got a couple. Okay, good. All right. So we have Chloe. Young boy in a dinosaur costume eats a snack while sitting on a sofa. Comfy and cozy child from Joanna. Ariel. A small child wearing a dinosaur onesie pajama sitting on a couch. Dinosaur costume child is sucking his thumb while relaxed in a lit room. I always think it's interesting because, okay, Jessica shared young child wearing a dinosaur onesie. Why do I have designer on the brain instead of dinosaur? Sitting on a couch looking at a window. So it's really interesting what we see differently. And we teach a whole workshop on this. One of the parts of the workshop that we talk about is what do you need to share and how you share things in alternative text that might be offensive to one group, may not be offensive to another group. There's, especially in the much more aware culture that we're moving into these days worldwide, which is wonderful, how we have to be a little bit careful about how we describe things. So thank you to everybody who participated. I really, really appreciate this. Yeah, it is kind of an earth theme color, isn't it, Joanna? Yeah, I think that little guy was just so cute. It was a fun one to share. So thanks, folks, for sharing. We're going to wrap up on just a few more things, and then we'll be able to open up for questions. Goodness, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint. So let's talk about, we all agree that we need to be inclusive. So let's talk about positive next steps and how you can take incorporating accessibility into your visual designs and making sure that everybody can access them. This is a section slide with the before named information. Okay. WeCo recommends these steps to begin to build a solid base of accessibility practices for visual professionals. The information we're listing next is shown in a smart chart with arrows. First, Education is essential. If people don't know why they need to do something, they are far less likely to engage in the process. Helping our teams understand the practices and tools to make visual designs accessible is part of what our company does. But you can also receive this information from other sources. Regardless, it's important that people understand the fundamentals of digital inaccessibility and how to foster inclusion with accessible practices. Second, analyze how your group is approaching the use of visual information. Do your processes lean towards applying visual design as purely visual? What processes need to change to include people who take in visual information in different ways? Analyzing this is the first step to getting everybody on the same page. Interesting anecdote about analyzing how your group is approaching visual design. Very early on when we started the company, I was actually hired to do, we called it a PDF intervention. We had a company back in those days, PDFs were largely inaccessible to people with screen readers. They've gotten much better. It's really not a problem anymore, but we used to work with groups to try to help them see that they didn't have to make a PDF out of everything because it was really problematic. So I was in one of those PDF interventions, and we were trying to determine, this group, it was a large group, a medical organization that created brochures for members, membership cards, all different kinds of things. And when we sat them down together and got the group talking about why do we insist that everything has to be put into a PDF format, the visual designers said it's because that works best for the printer. They were using the same visual design for print services as they were using on the website. And so the web developers in the room said, this is easy. We'll just take all that information and put it into HTML. You guys develop the PDFs you need for actual print documents. And it was solved. So that's why talking to your group is super important, because you've got people that are invested in doing things a certain way, and you may not know why. There may be a very good reason for it. But at least if everybody can talk about it, you can figure out what to do. So the next is planning. It is important because it's a roadmap by which your organization and teams can work together to implement new processes. So we can agree that something needs to be done, but unless we decide that alt tags need to be added to all photos, for example, and include that in the process planning, it's difficult to make the accessibility change actually happen. Finally, implementation. We recommend adding milestones and points in the timeline for process review to ensure that the plan and the process are working for everyone and everyone is actually doing it. Okay. So we suggest that you also might consider the Accessible by Design initiative. Digital creative firms are banding together to help each other learn and to encourage accessible visual design. You can see their introduction video on their website. That is accessible/communications.com. We'll send out that link when we send our recap. But this slide is showing the Accessible by Design video on their website. So now we're just going to open it up for questions, and we are a small enough group that if you would like to ask a question, Chloe, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So my name's Chloe. I'm a product designer at a software company in Toronto, and I am starting to learn about digital accessibility. I think that's a big part of my role, and I definitely see it as my responsibility to not only carry out the inner workings of when designing, but also to advocate for users using our software. So I would say the question that I have is, you mentioned in the implementation phase, sharing with your other coworkers and company-wide sort of how to get everybody involved and sort of how do we share this in a way with our teammates in a way for them to care, and so that everyone is kind of following along or participating in the overall initiative. I'd say that's one thing that I'm struggling with right now is how to convey the importance of this, but also how to encourage others to join me and participate in creating accessible software.
It's a question that we hear pretty much every day of the week.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier if it comes from the top down, but many accessibility efforts are grassroots in organizations.
Mm.
So we have kind of the same answer that we give is that, it's, well, in Canada, you all have a lot more urgency to comply with legal accessibility laws. So, there's educating people about the laws that you need to adhere to might be part of it. But we really believe in using attracting flies with honey and not vinegar, and getting people aware, like inviting them to come to some of our free webinars. It's a lot of people do that. Or you can even, we put these up in YouTube. You could even, if there's a topic that needs to be discussed or an open spot in a staff meeting, say, hey, this video is 30 minutes. Can we use this as a training? It's something interesting to learn about. But we found that a lot of people are really effective that way, just by kind of like dropping hints and inviting people to things and, using free resources. It's that organization that I was talking about had come to us and hired us because they had some pretty serious things happening around. They were a Medicare provider and they had to do this. And so it was pretty easy for them to just get everybody in a room. But when you're starting out, it really isn't easy. And I think that also, if there's anything that you can start doing personally in your work for accessibility, it's interesting how other people start to catch on to that. When I was at the Department of Transportation, I used to hear about web developer meetings, and nobody would let me know. I was the accessibility specialist for the agency. And I used to hop in a car and drive across the city to go have a few minutes to talk to people. And for me, being the evangelist was really helpful.
And so just to dovetail on that, what would you say is the best place to start in terms of my education of it? What, like, as a, I guess, a visual professional, where's the best place for me to start my education? And yeah, I'm wondering what that looks like or how to kick that off.
Yeah, let's see, where's this accessible by design, I thought was a really neat initiative. And I think that might be super helpful for you. But also the IAAP, or International Association of Accessibility Professionals, that is the worldwide affiliation that most of us who work in accessibility have. You could also, our classes at WeCo are really user focused. So sometimes it's easier to convince people when they realize that real people are involved. And so using our free webinars, is part of it too. But I think this accessible by design initiative is pretty cool and specifically designed for visual designers. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll definitely be looking into all of this. I'm very excited to get started.
Great. Thanks for coming. Do we have any other questions or comments? We've got about 10 minutes. Are we seeing anything else come in, Debbie or Patty?
I have not had anything else come in.
I'm just going to finish up with our resources, and folks, if you want to ask more questions, go ahead, raise your hand or put something in chat. So the resources that we offer, one that we think is super important is our WeCollege on-demand learning. It enables individuals as well as large teams and enterprises to train up on accessibility. We do, like I mentioned, we have a wonderful accessible, the alt text class, accessible Microsoft documents, that includes PowerPoints. And we also have a lot of technical classes that have to do with WCAG implementation for web developers. It opens January, so it's kind of like our holiday winter present. And we do have a highly discounted pre-sale on this for individuals and teams through November 19th. So you can contact Debbie or Patty, their client relations specialists here that are in the meeting today, or access info at theweco.com. This is a huge amount of training that we have done live, and clients have asked us for this for so long that we're getting it all integrated into a learning portal. So it's going to be a great wealth of user-focused learning information. We also have free stuff, and we really want you to use our free stuff. We have our free accessibility library, webinars like this on our YouTube channel. We also have accessibility events. We've got a really great meetup that we help sponsor with United Health called Accessibility Twin Cities Meetup, which is now international, so we just call it TC Meetup. And we are sponsoring a wonderful webinar. Is that the 28th, that meetup event, Debbie and Patty? It's the Monday after Thanksgiving. It's called Defending Accessibility, and one of our attorney friends from Perkins Coie, Amanda Bean, is going to be presenting on how she defends digital accessibility cases that we work with her on. We also have a blog, and just go to theweco.com/resources. You can see the resources tab. So really take advantage of our free stuff. We have blog and email quick tips you can sign up for, where you can learn accessibility a bite size at a time. One thing I forgot to mention is that we also have a free accessibility assessment, which is kind of like a sample hybrid of a manual audit and working with a WeCo user. It's like a usability test manual audit sample. And you can sign up for that right on the front page of our website. So also our client relations team, that's our fancy word for sales and customer service, and they're always here to answer your questions at accessinfo@theweco.com. Any other questions? Do we get something else coming up in chat?
Lynn, this is Debbie, and it looks like Chloe has her hand raised.
Oh, go ahead, Chloe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to lower it.
Nope.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
There are no other questions in chat at this time.
All right. Well, we'll give you back 4 minutes of your day. I want to thank everybody for coming. I love teaching these. I love answering your questions, and we're here to help. So please reach out to us if there's anything more that we can do for you. Thank you. Okay, we can stop the recording.